Hello and welcome. This is going to be a quick run through of the installation of Ubuntu, the new version 12.04 server on VMware Fusion 4 for the Macintosh. Need a couple of things before you get started. First of all, you need to install the VMware Fusion 4 product. That will allow you to run Ubuntu as a virtual machine on your Macintosh desktop. You can get that by visiting VMware.com. You'll notice that there's a 30-day free trial. Go ahead and download that, get it installed, and then after 30 days, if you decide that you like it, you can arrange to buy it. The next thing you need is the server ISO image file. This is an image file of the installation CD. To get that, visit ubuntu.com/download. Here's where you begin the download process. There are several options here: desktop, server, cloud-based infrastructure, and some other options. You're going to want to pick Ubuntu Server. That will take you to the Ubuntu Server download page. I want you to take a look over here at Choose Your Flavor. It defaults to 64-bit, but I'm going to recommend that you not select that. I'm going to recommend that you select 32-bit. If you select 64-bit, that would be a good choice if you were installing it on a physical server that had a processor that supported server functionality. But since you're going to be installing this in a virtual machine, you're going to find that 32-bit works better even if you might have a 64-bit processor. So go ahead and select 32-bit. Start the download. You can save that off on your desktop. Be aware that this is a large file, 700 some megabytes. So this could take anywhere from several minutes to actually, depending on your system and how busy the site is, quite a long time to download. So give yourself some time on that. Once it's downloaded, you're ready to go. So go ahead and fire up VMware. I already have one virtual machine installed. If you have just installed this product, you'll see a welcome screen at this point. But in any event, to go ahead and start to create the new virtual machine, we're going to select File and then New. Because we're using an ISO file, we're going to start by continuing without a disk. Then we need to choose the operating system disk image. So click this, click it again. You're going to then need to choose the file that you downloaded from Ubuntu. I had put mine on the desktop, so we'll go take a look there. Make sure you select the ISO file that you want to install. In this case, we're installing version 12.04 server. So go ahead and select that, click Open, and you should see that appear in the drop-down window here. Go ahead and click Continue. Now at this point, you may get a prompt to download VMware Tools if you haven't already downloaded VMware Tools for Linux. So if you get that prompt, go ahead and accept. It's not going to show on this particular demonstration because I already have that installed. But if you get that prompt, you should take that download option. Go ahead and click Continue. Make sure that Linux is selected here and Ubuntu is selected here. If not, you can go ahead and select them from the drop-down box. We're not going to use the easy install method for server. Easy install works very well for desktop. I think actually using the manual install method is a better choice for server. It gives you a few more options during the install process, and as you're going to see, it's really not that difficult. So uncheck easy install, click Continue. Review the settings. Guest operating system is Ubuntu. Memory it's going to use is 1 gigabyte. Actually, for server, you could probably get by with less, depending on how much you have in your machine, maybe 512 megabytes. If you want to adjust that, you can go to Customize Settings. Otherwise, go ahead and leave it at the default. The disk size is the maximum size that this disk will reach. It starts out small and only grows as you add files to it. If you think that you need more because you know you're going to be storing video files or some such thing, again, you can use customized settings to raise that limit, but it's unlikely to be necessary for most purposes. We're going to recommend that you leave it at shared networking network address translation. That's a safer bet for the installation process. If at some later point you want to switch that to bridged networking, you can do that, but I'm going to recommend you start out with the NAT selection, which is the default. And Ubuntu 12.04 server is the ISO that we're going to install. When you're happy with all those settings, click Finish. We're going to need to give the system a name. I'm going to call this Ubuntu 12.04S for server. It's going to create a subfolder in your virtual machines folder. That's a good choice, but if you have a reason to do it, save it somewhere else, perhaps on an external hard drive or something, you could select that at this point. Go ahead and click Save, and this will get the installation started. The machine will automatically boot. It will first come to a language screen. Let me talk about the installation screen for a minute. The installation screen, as will server be when you finish installing it, is a command line interface. And so the mouse doesn't work. What you need to do to be able to work with inside this box is to click your mouse inside the box. And at that point, the mouse is going to disappear. Note in the top right of the screen, it says to release your mouse, press Control and the Command key. And when you press that, the mouse is released and you can go about and do other things. But while you're working within the system, you won't have a mouse, and to be able to work in this box, you need to click inside the box. And from that point, your keyboard keys work. So that you'll use the Enter key, the Tab key, and the up and down arrow keys to navigate through this installation routine. Once you click in the box and the mouse disappears, the first thing you need to do is select your language. You can arrow up and down as you see. To select a language, it's probably going to be English. When that's highlighted, press the Return key. Now at this point, I'm going to suggest that it might be a good idea to arrow down here and check disk for defects. I'm not going to demonstrate that, but if you select that option and press enter, it'll run through some routines to make sure that the file that you downloaded from Ubuntu didn't get corrupted. That can cause installation difficulties. So check the disk for defects. It'll run through some routines and return you to this point when you're done. When you're done, make sure Install Ubuntu Server is highlighted. Press enter. And the installation routine is going to begin. First thing you need to do is pick the installation language. Again, that's probably going to be English for you. Press return. The country, territory, or area, it's going to guess at that as well. United States is probably going to be your selection, but of course you can pick one of the others if it's not the one that you need. It's now going to ask you if you want to configure the keyboard. I'm going to recommend against this. If you have a non-standard keyboard, you probably already know it. If you select yes, it's going to go through an exercise where you have to press a bunch of different keys, and I don't think you actually want to do that. So the default is no, don't detect keyboard layout, and that's going to work best for most of you. So press enter. And then you get to the point where you can pick your country of origin for the keyboard. This is where if you knew you had a different kind of a keyboard, you could select it from the list. We're going to go with the default English and the default English US keyboard layout. Of course, if you need something else, by all means pick it. It's going to go through some initial detection stages here. This part can take several seconds as it loads these additional components. It will attempt to configure the network with DHCP. If you select a NAT, that will almost certainly succeed. Now you need to enter a host name for the system. This should be something short and sweet, not multiple words. Make it simple. I'm going to choose Ubuntu, which is the suggested default, and then add 12.04S. So we know what the system is. You may, of course, choose something else, but as I say, keep it one word. Don't use any characters other than numbers and letters. And when you're ready, press the Tab key so that Continue is highlighted, and then press the Enter key to continue, Return key to continue on with the installation. You want a full name for the user. You can type in a full name here. I'm just going to enter user1 for the full username, and I'm going to retain user1 as the actual account name, the username for the account. So when you've done that, again, press Tab and press the Return key. You may choose something else if you like. You're going to need to choose a password. I'm going to choose password. Tab and then press Return to continue. You need to re-enter that. Now it asks you if you want to configure your home directory for encryption so that those files remain private. You may if you like, but but I'm going to suggest you just take the default no on this. You could elect to encrypt the disk later if you choose. The default is no, then I'm going to press return to continue with the installation. It will set up the system clock from the internet. You have an internet location, and then based on your IP address, it's going to take its best guess at your physical location. It's almost always right. I'm going to accept the default for yes. If it's not correct, you can tab over to no and see a list of time zones that you can pick from. I'm going to press return on the default for yes for the time zone being correct. It's going to detect some more hardware. I'll pause the recording until we get to the next prompt that you need to be aware of. The next prompt that you need to be aware of is the disk partitioner. For this exercise, if you were setting this up on a physical computer, especially if you had multiple disks, you might want to set up the LVM or encrypted LVM, or you might even actually go through a manual partitioning process. I'm going to recommend for this virtual machine it only has the one disk, and there really isn't any need to go through any of these other options. So I'm going to suggest you arrow up and just select guided, use entire disk, and that's going to be perfectly acceptable for this virtual machine. Arrow up till that's highlighted, and then press the return key. There will then be only one disk to partition. It will be selected, so just go ahead and press the return key again to get that started. It will work through a partitioning process. Now, at this point, if you are installing this on a physical computer, you would want to look at this section very carefully and make sure that it's going to do what you expected it to do. You wouldn't want to overwrite any data that you had on other disks or other operating systems that might be installed. However, that's not really a concern for the virtual machine. When you're working within VMware, there is only one. It's a virtual hard drive. It's really just a file on your computer. So you can go ahead and tab to yes, write the changes to disk, and go ahead and do that. Press return. It will format the partitions and begin an installation process. Again, I will pause the system here until we get to the next prompt that you need to be concerned with. Now, the next prompt that you're going to get asks you whether you need to configure access to a proxy. With a home computer setup, this is not something you're going to need to worry about. If you happen to work in a business or corporate environment that goes through external firewall proxy system, then you need to enter proxy information here in order to be able to get outside the local box, and you would ask your network administrator for the proper information to enter here. But in all likelihood, you're not going to have to worry about this, so press the tab key to highlight continue, and then press the return key. And again, it's going to take a while, so I will pause the recording. The next prompt you're going to need to answer is whether or not to set up automatic updates. This is something you usually do manually on a server on a scheduled basis, and I'm going to suggest that you accept the default for no automatic updates. You can select one of the others if you would like to do that, but otherwise make sure that no automatic updates is selected as the default, and then press the return key. Now, at this point, it's going to ask what other software, server software, you want to install, and let me explain how this is going to work before you press the return key. You need to use the up and down arrow keys to get to these different components. When you see one that you want to install, press the space bar, and the space bar will put a little asterisk in that box there. I'm going to suggest that at the very least you want to install OpenSSH Server. That allows you to access the server using utilities such as SSH or some other utilities you can use to get at the server, transfer files to and from it. And then I'm also going to suggest that you're going to want to install LAMP. So arrow down to LAMP, press the space bar. That installs the Apache web server, MySQL database, and the PHP language. And at the very minimum, I think these are the applications that you would probably want to consider installing. And of course, if you know that you need any of these others, you can pick them at this point, or they can all be installed later. When you finish making your selections, press the Tab key so that Continue is highlighted, and then only after checking to make sure that the applications you want are installed should you press the Return key. That will begin to install these applications. Now it's going to ask you, if you choose to install LAMP, it's going to ask you for a password for the MySQL root user. You can leave this blank. It's not recommended. I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and select a password. I'm just going to select MySQL, tab, and then enter to continue. And then you need to repeat that password. Again, tab, and then press enter to continue. Depending on what other of the server components you installed, there may be other prompts as well. If you ask to install the mail server, for example, you'll need to answer some questions about how that should be configured. So there may be other questions there and prompts depending on what additional you've selected to configure. Now it's going to select and install the software. This will take several minutes. We'll pause the recording and come back to it at the next prompt. Now at this point it's going to ask if you want to install the Grub bootloader to the master boot record. That just has to do with the way the system boots, and if you were installing this on a system that already had another operating system on it, for example, if you were installing this in Boot Camp, or if you were installing it on a Windows machine that Windows was already loaded, you'd want to give some thought to this. You may have another bootloader already in place, but since this is a virtual machine and in the virtual disk there's only one operating system, you need to go ahead and go ahead with installing this bootloader. So make sure that the default yes is highlighted and press the return key to complete the installation. At this point, the installation is complete. It says to remove the installation media. Remember that we are actually installing this from an ISO file, and in fact, VMware will boot from the virtual hard drive, so you don't actually need to do anything to remove the ISO file. Continue should be highlighted, so just press return to finish the installation. It will finish the installation and then reboot into the new system. It will take a few seconds to shut down and then reboot. You'll see several items fly by that you can ignore. The next prompt will be your login prompt. That'll be coming up in a second here. At this point, you're asked to log in with a username and password you set during the installation. So I'm going to log in as user 1, press return. And now for password, keep in mind that Linux does not echo anything here, even asterisk, so just go ahead and type in the password and press return. And that should log you into the system. And after a few introductory notices, you see the command line prompt here. This is the infamous command line from which you will begin to do all your operations. Now at this point, if you want to shut the system down, there are two ways that you can do it. You can either issue the command line prompt for shutting the system down, and that's sudo, S-U-D-O, shutdown, -sign and capital P. Be very careful with the case because Linux is case sensitive. And then the time you want to shut down, which is now. Press return, and then you would enter your password. You need to enter the password because this is a super user command that requires root authority to do that. So that's one way to shut down, and that will shut down the virtual machine. The other thing you might consider is just pausing it. Now remember that you have to hit the control and the command key to release the mouse so that you can get back into your system here. And back in the VMware menu for this particular virtual machine, which is this gray area up here, there's a option to suspend the guest operating system. It looks like the pause icon. So simply pressing that will cause the system to go into suspension. And it will then kind of freeze it. And when it's done freezing it, that suspends it in exactly its current status. And we can shut that down now. So you can see the image of where it left it, and to start this up again, you would press the start key, here, the start icon. If you completely shut down before, then the system will reboot from scratch. Otherwise, it will just resume from suspension at the point where you left it. So that's the brief introduction to installing Ubuntu 12.04 Server into VMware Fusion. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.